Mercedes just lost an advantage worth nearly 2/10 per lap, and it happened overnight. A hidden engine trick, completely legal, used in silence for 3 races, and powerful enough to decide pole positions. Until Ferrari spotted one detail no one else saw. Not a boost, not a violation, something far more dangerous. The car wasn't getting faster. It simply refused to slow down. And that tiny difference changed everything. Because the moment Ferrari asked one question, the FIA stepped in. And the second they started watching, the entire advantage disappeared. Which means one thing. What we thought was Mercedes' true performance might not have been real at all. And now, with that edge gone, the fight at the front is about to be completely exposed. At first, it didn't look like a problem. Because when you win, nobody asks how. They just look at the result. Pole positions, strong qualifying pace, a car that always seemed to deliver, right at the end of the lap. And that's where the illusion begins. Because Mercedes didn't dominate the entire lap. They didn't look unbeatable in every sector. But in the final meters, they were always there. Always just a little bit faster. And in Formula One, that's all you need. A few hundredths, a single tenth. That's the difference between first and third. Between controlling the race and fighting from behind. But here's what makes this so important. That advantage was never obvious. It didn't show up in usual places. Not in cornering speed. Not in traction. Not even in straight-line dominance over the whole lap. It appeared at the exact moment where nobody expects to find something unusual. The very end, when the lap is almost over. When most people think nothing else can change. But that's where Mercedes was gaining everything. And the rest of the grid didn't realize it. Because they were looking in the wrong places. They were analyzing sectors, comparing setups, chasing balance, while Mercedes was extracting performance from a moment no one was focusing on. And that's what made it so effective. Because if you don't know where to look, you don't even know you're losing time. And if you don't know you're losing time, you can't fix it. So race after race, session after session, that hidden advantage kept working, quietly, consistently, until it became part of the results, part of the narrative, part of what people believed was just superior performance. But here's where the tension starts to build. Because in Formula One, no advantage stays hidden forever. Not when every team is analyzing every millisecond. Not when engineers are comparing data from every possible angle. Eventually, something doesn't add up. And when it doesn't, the entire story begins to crack. Because the moment one team realizes the pattern, the moment they understand where the time is coming from, everything changes. And that moment was closer than Mercedes expected. And that moment didn't come from suspicion. It came from confusion. Because Ferrari wasn't looking for a trick. They were looking for answers. Why are we losing time in the exact same place every lap? That's the question. And in Formula One, when the same problem appears again and again, it's never random. So they went deeper. Not into the obvious data. Not into the full lap comparisons. Into the details most people ignore. The final meters. The last seconds. The part of the lap everyone assumes is already decided. And that's where everything changed. Because when Ferrari isolated that section, the numbers didn't make sense. The expected drop in speed wasn't there. Not for Mercedes. While every other car showed the same pattern. A gradual loss. A natural limitation. Mercedes didn't. Their speed curve stayed flat. Stable. Almost too perfect. And that's the moment where curiosity turns into suspicion. Because there are only 2 possibilities. Either Mercedes built something extraordinary, or they understood something no one else did. And Ferrari needed to know which one it was. But here's where the story takes a different path. Because most teams in that situation would stay quiet. They would try to replicate it, copy it, use it, without anyone noticing. That's how Formula One usually works. But Ferrari didn't do that. They chose something far more aggressive. They went straight to the FIA, and they asked for clarity. Now, that might sound simple, but in this sport it's explosive. Because the moment you involve the FIA, you force transparency. You force investigation. You force answers. And once that process starts, nothing stays hidden. The data gets reviewed. The behavior gets analyzed. The intent gets questioned. And suddenly, what was invisible becomes impossible to ignore. That's exactly what happened. Because once the FIA looked at the data, they saw the same thing Ferrari saw. That perfect stability at the end of the lap. That absence of slowdown. That behavior that didn't match the expected system. And now, the key difference. They weren't just asking what was happening. They were asking why. Why does the system behave like this? Why does it stop limiting power at that exact moment? Why does it look controlled? And when you ask those questions, you don't just find answers. You expose intent. And intent is where everything changes. Because now, it's no longer about a clever idea. It becomes a deliberate action, timed, calculated, repeated. And once that is clear, the FIA has no room to ignore it. Not because it breaks the rules, but because of what it creates. Unpredictable behavior, unexpected speed differences, situations where drivers cannot anticipate what the car ahead will do. And in Formula One, that's where danger begins. So the reaction is inevitable, not loud, not dramatic, but decisive. They start monitoring everything, every shutdown, every trace, every anomaly in the data. And from that moment on, the trick is no longer hidden. It's exposed, not publicly, but technically. And in Formula One, that's enough to end it. Because once something is being watched, using it becomes a risk that can cost a lap, a position, an entire weekend. And no team at that level takes that risk. So just like that, an advantage that was shaping the grid disappears, quietly, completely. But this is where the Real story begins. Because losing an advantage like that doesn't just slow you down, it reveals something much more important, what your real performance actually is. And this is where the real pressure begins. Because losing an advantage is one thing. Understanding what you are without it is something else entirely. For Mercedes, this isn't just a technical change. It's a reset, a forced reset. Because for 3 races, part of their performance came from something hidden, something precise, something they could rely on at the most critical moment of the lap. Now that moment is gone. And when you remove something like that, the entire balance of the car changes. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough for drivers to feel it immediately. That final straight no longer gives back time. The car behaves differently. The lap ends differently. And suddenly, what felt natural feels incomplete. That's the first impact. But the deeper one happens inside the team. Because now the engineers have to answer a difficult question. Where do we find that time again? And the truth is you don't. Not quickly. Because this wasn't a setup trick. It wasn't something you adjust overnight. It was built into the system, into the logic of how the car behaves at the limit. Replacing that takes time, development, new ideas. And in Formula One, time is the one thing you don't have. Because while one team is trying to recover, others are moving forward. And that's where the situation becomes dangerous for Mercedes. Because the rest of the grid is no longer chasing something invisible. They're chasing something real, something measurable, something they can fight. And that changes the dynamic completely. Now every team knows where the performance comes from. Every team understands the limits again. Every team is working with the same reality. And when that happens, the smallest weaknesses become visible. For Mercedes, that could mean something very simple. They're still fast, but maybe not as fast as they looked. Maybe those final tenths were the difference. The difference between being the reference and being one of many. And in Formula One, that shift is brutal. Because once you lose that edge, you don't just lose time. You lose control. Control of qualifying. Control of race strategy. Control of the entire weekend. And when you lose control, you start reacting instead of leading. That's the real danger. Because reacting puts you behind. It forces you into decisions under pressure. It forces drivers to push harder, to take more risks, to try to recover something that isn't there anymore. And that's where mistakes begin. Small ones at first. A missed apex, a compromised exit, then bigger ones. Lockups, overdriving, lost laps. And suddenly, the advantage you had is not just gone. It's turned into a weakness. But here's the part that changes everything. Because while Mercedes is dealing with that loss, another team is experiencing the exact opposite. Ferrari. They didn't lose anything. They didn't depend on that trick. Their car behaves exactly the same as before. Stable, predictable, consistent. And in this new reality, that consistency becomes an advantage. Not because they got faster, but because everyone else got closer to them. And in a sport decided by thousands, that's enough. Enough to change the order. Enough to shift the balance. Enough to create a completely different fight at the front. So now, as the next race approaches, the situation is clear. Mercedes has to prove something. Not that they can be fast, but that they can be just as fast without what they lost. And that is a much harder challenge. Because speed's one thing, sustaining it under pressure, without hidden advantages. That's what defines the real contenders. And now, for the first time this season, we are about to see exactly who those contenders really are. And if you follow that pressure just a little further, you start to see where this could really go. Because this isn't just about losing performance. It's about what happens next. In Formula One, every team builds momentum. Race by race, session by session, confidence grows. Decisions become sharper. Execution becomes cleaner. But when something like this happens, that momentum breaks. And once it breaks, it doesn't come back instantly. For Mercedes, that's the real danger. Because now, every result will be questioned. Every lap will be analyzed differently. Was that pace real? Or was it helped? And that question changes everything inside a team. Because uncertainty slows you down. It affects decisions. It creates hesitation. And hesitation, in a sport this precise, costs time. Meanwhile, other teams feel the opposite. They see an opportunity, a moment where the gap closes, where the fight becomes real again. And in Formula One, opportunity is everything. Because when teams believe they can win, they push harder, they develop faster, they take smarter risks. And that's how advantages are built. Not just on track, but inside the mindset of the team. And this is where Ferrari becomes the center of the story again. Because they didn't just expose the trick. They changed the direction of the competition. Without adding power, without changing their car. They altered the playing field itself. And now they arrive in a completely different position. Not chasing an invisible advantage. Not trying to understand something hidden. But competing in a system they already understand. And that clarity is powerful. Because while others are adapting, Ferrari is executing. And execution wins. But here's the final layer. The one that defines whether this moment becomes history. Or just a footnote. Because now, everything is equal again. No hidden tricks. No invisible gains. No loopholes deciding the final meters of a lap. Just performance. Real, measurable, undeniable performance. And that creates the ultimate test. Not of engineering alone, but of everything. Drivers, strategy, consistency, pressure. Because when nothing is hiding anymore, there is nowhere to hide. And that's what makes the next race so important. Not because of the result itself, but because of what it reveals. Who adapts the fastest, who understands a new reality, who can perform without relying on anything extra. And when the cars cross the line, when the lap is complete, when the timing screen tells the truth, one thing will become clear. This wasn't just the moment Mercedes lost an advantage. It was the moment Formula One reset itself. And the only question that matters now is this. When everything became real again, who was ready for it and who wasn't?